Are you ready to start the meeting? Would you? I call this meeting December 4th, 2025. The time is 6 o'clock, almost. And would you do a roll call, please?
Meredith Bullock,
Here.
Eric Dowd,
Here.
Mark Mahoney.
Here.
Heather McDonald.
Here.
John Williams.
Here.
And Kim McGee will be absent.
Approval of the October 2nd Historic Preservation Commission minutes. Is there any comments, additions, corrections?
Looks fine to me.
Looks fine to me.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I move to accept the minutes.
I second.
Okay, the motion, yeah, the minutes have been approved. Are there any items from citizens present not on the agenda? No one out there wants to just put their two words in, okay? Action items. The next action item is 242 to 256 Main Street by the Form Fee Architects. And does the staff have a presentation with respect to that?
Yeah. So we do have a packed agenda, so I'll try to do this quickly and then let them do their presentation. But essentially, this lot has lots of structures of merit around it, and the history of a structure of merit right next to it. The smithy is still there, obviously structure of merit. The bakery that used to be right next door is no longer there, but it was a structure of merit. And then the building next to that on the same block is also a structure of merit. So very historical block is the context. You saw this before, almost exactly a year ago. And you mainly talked about concerns with building height and architectural compatibility. Also, as a quick note, buildings over 50 years old in the HCC that aren't landmarked, that are proposing demolition. There's there's an initial review process with 2 members of the HPC and staff to review to see if it has an individual landmark, possibility. And so 2 members of the commission looked at it and determined that it did not. So this discussion will only include the proposed new building and not the demolition of the existing structure.
Isn't that building 51 years old?
It's close to 50, yeah. It's like 60,
Built in 74, you said?
I think, yeah. Can't remember exactly the date.
That does make it good stuff.
Mhm. Yep. Let's see. Okay, so for building height, this was discussed last time, but essentially, the building will appear as 37.5 feet tall. This is because of a parapet for the roof, which is allowed by zoning code. And then they're also proposing an alternative compliance for a stairway and an elevator override. 2 small portions of the building that will be set back from the property line, and those will be at 42 feet and 46 feet. So this is one of the big things you guys should discuss, is whether it's compatible with the zone district and meets the intent of the design guidelines. The guidelines don't discuss height other than a brief mention that the historic pattern has been 1 to 2 stories and that current zoning allows 3 stories. The design guidelines also stress the importance of stepping back each story as it gets taller to minimize the impact on pedestrians. So that would be a good thing to look at when you're discussing this building height issue, is how impactful this extra height is to pedestrians on the street. Let's see, in terms of the design guidelines, it meets 3.1 pretty well. For 3.2, it explicitly states that the traditional pattern has been tall first floors dedicated to storefronts, and that this pattern should be respected by new construction. And this project proposes a reduced first floor ceiling height. The UDC requires the height from the floor to the ceiling in HCC to be 14 feet on the first floor. And the applicant is asking for an alternative compliance to reduce that to 12 feet. Another part of this section continue the pattern of tall ceiling height on the first floor. In no case shall the first floor be less than 14 feet in height as defined by zoning. The project does propose a visual delineation of floor levels at 14 feet on the facade, so that from the street level, the massing visually matches other buildings. But, their pedestrian experience internal to the building may be different. So this is another thing you guys should discuss, is whether or not you support this alternative compliance request. In terms of architectural details, it has a cornice. And for materials, it will mainly be brick veneer, wood siding, and metal paneling. And painted wood and painted metals are both mentioned as appropriate secondary materials in this section as well. So yeah, if you guys don't have any questions for me, I'll hand it over to them.
You have any questions for Loretta? Okay,
We should hear from them.
yeah, we're open to your presentation.
Okay.
Are we presenting? That me? And stop.
Okay. So I'm Andrew Dillon with Form Fi. This is Forrest Lundgren, also with Form Fi. We'll get through the beginning of this pretty quickly, just to kind of provide some background and then get into building design quickly. Ellie mentioned the existing building in 1974. right next to the smithy, which is the component that we're leaning pretty heavily into and doing our best to respond to, obviously knowing the importance of that building to the community. The proposed building is a 3-story structure, 15,000 square feet of floor area and a 2,000 square foot roof deck. The floor area interior is broken down into about 9,000 square feet of commercial floor area and 6,000 square feet of residential floor area, broken up between 4 different residential units. And as Ellie pointed out, the proposal is to demolish the existing building to build the new structure. Jumping into the historic preservation design guidelines, starting with site design. The building does adhere to a 0-foot setback at the front to respond to kind of historic context there. And on the northwest corner, and I should say, as I go through this presentation, I'll kind of call out page numbers as we go. So right now I'm on page 4, discussing site design. A recess corner entry off the northwest corner, with the intention of obviously most foot traffic coming from the west to the building, and also trying to respond to the green space that is the smithy lawn next door. So softening that edge for pedestrian entry and creating a pedestrian transition between Main Street and the building. Parking is all provided off the alleyway and serves the residential use. There's no requirement for commercial parking in the HCC. And like I said, the goal here is to minimize the impact to the landmark structure at 26 3rd Street, which is the Village Smithy. So the intention here, we've got one building setback, not that it's required, but on the west side of the building, a pathway to get from the front of the building to the back of the building. So we've moved our building with that pathway as far away from that shared property line as possible, or as feasible for the design. Moving on to page 5, building form and massing. So the building is organized in 3 distinct bays just to sort of reduce and minimize that scale. As Ellie pointed out, there's a requirement to start stepping back in mass as the building comes off of the street. So the first 20 feet has a lowered height limit. And once you get beyond that 20 feet, that's when we step the building up. And so looking at the elevation on page 5 there, the intention is to have kind of 3 distinct bays, obviously understanding this is a larger building and an intention to break down that mass and create a smaller scale, more pedestrian friendly. And the goal there is avoiding a monolithic visual presence along Main Street. The massing is also organized with a clear base, midsection, and cornice composition, which is a direct quote from the design guidelines. Kind of a plinth idea at the bottom along Main Street, a broken up 2nd story with a taller middle section and 2 decks that flank that middle section on the 2nd floor. And then when you get back to beyond that 20-foot setback, that's when it steps up to 3 stories full width of the building. As Ellie pointed out, we are requesting a 12-foot floor to floor alternative compliance, and the goal there, the front facade of the building, we'll get into alternative compliance. We have some specific diagrams discussing this, so maybe I'll actually wait to discuss that for just a minute, but we'll get into kind of how we're addressing that with the design. And then with the alternative compliance, the only items that are going above and beyond that exemption would be the stair tower and the elevator override. So again, we'll get into that as an alternative compliance diagram here in just a minute. Page 6, talking about architectural details. The goal here is incorporating extensive glazing, but treating those as punched openings as opposed to kind of more modern storefront. So it's responding to the historic context without trying to act like it's a historic building. So sort of towing that line between fitting in and also helping obviously everybody understand the time and place of the building. The articulated storefront and recessed entry are all kind of components of that front facade. And a lot of it aimed at engaging pedestrians along the street. Predominantly materials are predominantly brick masonry with secondary materials of metal and wood, especially at the ground level. And the components of the building facing the street, mostly brick is what you'll see, and that obviously fitting into the historic materials of town. With some of those secondary materials showing up as the building starts to step back. Page 7, dealing with the accessories and appurtenances. There's no signage proposed at the time, but if in the event that that does come up, we'll respond to the guideline requirements of high quality metal materials illuminated discreetly. All the mechanical equipment and solar panels proposed for the building are on the roof deck and in the rear 2/3 of the building, so fully screened from view from the street and pushed as far away from that public access as possible. And all lighting would be dark sky compliant and shielded from view. So that addresses kind of the 4 sections of the historic preservation design guidelines. Page 8 shows a few different views, a few different renderings of the building, a couple from Main Street, and then one looking at the Smithy building, looking to the east. Pages 9 through 12 are showing the floor plans, which I don't think we have to get too bogged down on tonight, but just to give an idea of how the interior is laid out. Main level's commercial with the garages off the alley. Second floor is a combination of commercial and residential, and the 3rd floor is entirely residential. And then, as I stated, that's about a 2,000 square foot roof deck on the roof. Moving to page 13, just a quick snippet at the front of the building discussing materials. So primarily brick veneer with complements of wood siding and metal paneling. Metal paneling mostly to surround windows. Page 14, we felt these diagrams were important, even though they're not technically part of the HPC requirements, but discussing solar studies or shading diagrams as they relate to the Smithy, obviously knowing that one of the greatest features of the Smithy is the yard and how that's used, especially during the summer months as people are waiting for tables. So that first top right image you're seeing would be the shadow cast at 9 a.m. So fairly minimal from our building. And then as the day moves along, you can kind of see how that sun study and how that shading moves along or moves away from the Smithy. So there has been care taken to make sure that the building responds accordingly to the neighboring property and making sure that we're not adversely affecting especially the yard. Page 15 is the first alternative compliance request. As we stated, this one is the change from a 14-foot floor to a 12-foot floor to floor. And the bottom 2 diagrams, what those are meant to show, the one on the left is the 12-foot floor to floor, which is what we're asking for. The image on the right is the 14-foot required. And the goal here is to create basically a band on the facade of the building so that there really is no distinction between a 12-foot or a 14-foot floor to floor, and the only change is on the interior of the building. With this being a 3-story building and adhering to the height limits, that change from 14 to 12 allows for much better interior space on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And then especially the 2nd floor with the residential unit at the back of the building, and then the 3rd floor with being entirely residential. The goal here is just to create better, more livable space in the downtown core. Without that exemption, the 2 floor plates get pretty squeezed together, and we'd have to make some adjustments there just to try and get livable space, what we would consider livable space. And we're really talking about a ceiling height. In the 14-foot floor to floor, our ceiling height is down to about 8 feet. And with the alternative compliance, if that were granted, we're at about 10 feet floor to ceiling. Alternative compliance request number 2, which is the height limit change from 35 feet to 42 feet. What we've done is provided 2 diagrams here, and the important point to sort of keep in mind, the black section diagram shows the building with the alternative compliance. So this is with the 42-foot height exemption. And the red overlay is if we adhere to a standard height exemption of 35 feet. And the only two items that go above and beyond that 35 feet, if a 42-foot exemption is granted, is the stair core and the elevator. So the best way to think about this is 42 feet is the top of the elevator core, and then elevators having their overrun requirements actually takes the roof deck level. You start at that 42 feet at the elevator, work your way down to the roof deck. And overall, it pushes the roof deck down by about 2 feet. So it's an alternative compliance to ask for a greater height limit. But what it in effect does is reduces the overall height of the majority of the building. So it would just be the elevator core and just the stair that go above that 35 feet. So by granting it, you'd actually be pushing the building down by about 2 feet overall, which, going back to the sun study, every foot you push the building down, obviously that's a foot less of shadow that's cast on the neighboring building. So I think we can probably come back to this because there's probably a few more discussion points there, but I just wanted to present those diagrams so you understand kind of what those are showing. Page 17 is just looking at the front facade with the exact same comparison. This one, it's a little easier to see if it's side by side, but just again to point out that the building with the alternative compliance, the overall height of the building is actually lower. Page 18 is just a quick diagram showing from the sidewalk across the street, looking back at the building. And this is with the elevator and the stair overrun. You don't see either of those from the street as viewed across the street. The main point being that we've taken the items that we understand are kind of going above and beyond the standard height limit and push them farther back away from the facade, and using the building to actually screen those elements. So trying to minimize the visual impact from Main Street of those two items. And then page 19 is just a quick summary to kind of close it up. Any clarifying questions as
Yeah.
we dive in?
Questions from the commissioners to the applicant?
So with alternative 2, or the variance 2, you said you're gonna actually lower the building height 2 feet, so it's gonna be 33 feet in height instead of 35. If you allow the stairs to be 42, you're saying you're lowering the actual building height by 2 feet.
Correct. So with a 30, let's just start with kind of the standard height limit. At 35 feet, that would be the roof deck level, and then the parapet is allowed to project beyond that 35 feet by 30 inches. And so by going with the alternative compliance and starting at the elevator roof and working your way back down, it pushes the parapet and that roof deck level back down 2 feet. So yeah, the roof deck itself would be about 33 feet.
The roof deck itself would be what?
33 feet.
Hmm.
Is taken up by the reduction of the first floor height?
So start from the roof deck, it's at 35 feet. And then you're gonna add the stairs up to 42, which is 6 more feet. Right? No, 7 more feet,
Yep.
okay.
But if the so without the 42-foot alternative compliance, there would be no stair and no elevator to the roof.
Right,
Because we can't fit those underneath that standard height limit. So essentially what we're asking for and what we're utilizing the exemption for is just to provide equal access to that roof deck. There's no other purpose behind that alternative compliance. And then what it does is it takes the rest of the building, which is, I'm essentially looking at the rest of the building as all the parapeted walls or basically the whole roof footprint, and it'll push that down 2 feet.
Does that make sense to you? It,
If you lower the first floor by that 2 feet. Right, instead of 14 feet, you're at 12 feet,
okay,
and you pull the second floor and the roof down with it.
oh, so you're talking about alternative 1.
Well, what happens if alternative compliance 2 is the only one granted, then the first floor, the floor to floor of the main level would still be at 14 feet. And that basically the second and the third floor would be at 8 feet each, an 8-foot floor to ceiling each. Does that make sense? And so that's where alternative compliance number 1 comes in. Is to ask for an additional foot per floor. So I stated earlier that it'd be 10 feet. It'd actually be about 9 feet for the second and the third floor.
And the roof deck stays at 35 feet.
The roof deck stays at, if with the alternative compliance, the 42-foot height limit, the roof deck is at 33 feet. With a 30-inch parapet above that.
At 33 feet. Right?
The parapet is
Yeah, 2 foot
36
down, yeah.
or close to 37.
How much space are you giving between the floor and the ceiling? In these dimensions, roughly a foot?
If we pair up both of the alternative compliance,
Well, in either case, I'm just asking how much interstitial space you're getting
oh, I
between the
see,
floors.
between the ceiling of one level and the floor
Yeah.
above.
Right,
So the structure of the building, I'd have to go back and look at the structural drawings. I believe they're 14-inch TJIs, and it's a steel and wood structure.
right.
So roughly speaking, it'd be about 18 inches of space,
Okay.
and it's squeezed down to the bare minimum to get the spans of the building to work. And then part of this, I mean, obviously this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but part of trying to increase that floor to ceiling per floor is to account for things like mechanical systems and, drop ceilings for lightings, all of the stuff we don't like to design at the beginning, but has to be in a building.
Yeah. A question I had is the elevator necessary per code, or is that just an amenity for the inhabitants?
So if there is a roof deck, the elevator is required to provide fair and equal access to that roof deck. And the point of the roof deck is obviously an amenity for the inhabitants of the building, both on the commercial and the residential side, visitors to the building. And then what we discussed a little bit last time and kind of got sicked into the weeds a little bit on was opening up the roof deck to the public on certain event or during certain events. So the way that we're looking at the roof deck and the way that we're sort of designing this building, trying to be obviously a component of the community, would be access during things like First Fridays, Mountain Fair, things like that, and trying to maybe partner with different organizations around town to host different events up there. And we're really looking at it as kind of a roof deck level park. And obviously the view of Sopris from up there would be second to none in town. So trying to provide not an amenity that's just open to the public whenever they feel like coming, but something that is provided during certain events and sort of
We
curated.
just want a
if you wanna call
community
it that.
event space,
What's
a
that?
community event space.
Yeah. Yep.
I think you have to be a little careful with that because you don't want to describe that as an assembly, which would I'm sure have other code requirements involved with it.
Well, and the building is actually designed so that it conforms to like the IBC and all of that regarding a roof deck. And that has to do with number of stories and access and egress off the deck and all of that. So it has been designed with all of that in mind. Cause yeah, we certainly don't want to call it a space that it can't technically be and then just sort of use it that way. It
Right.
needs to be designed intentionally.
It's more like the property owners, it's gonna be like a private event space that is open to the community for certain events.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's just zoning codes.
So the alternative compliance has 4 criteria that need to be met.
Correct.
Can you go through those and address how you think that the project meets each of those?
We could go through it, sorry to jump in, we could go through those, but again, your purview here is with the design guidelines. So the P and Z will discuss those criteria at their hearing. But really your guys' comments should be, in relation to the design guidelines.
Yeah, and that's why I felt it was almost impossible to not discuss alternative compliance as it relates to the design guidelines, because the number one alternative compliance discusses building massing and just sort of the appearance of the building from the street. So I felt it important to point out that we're not just asking for a floor to floor exemption just to create much better space, but that from the street, it actually equates to a building that looks very much the same. There's no visual impact from the street. And then the second one I felt was important to present here because of what it does to the overall massing of the building. And obviously trying to reduce the scale of the building and the overall height of the building. I know it's a little bit of a kind of a mind bender to think about starting at the elevator and working your way back down, and how can an additional 7 feet of height actually reduce the height of the building. But that was the point I wanted to hammer home, and what we're trying to convey on page 16 is showing this overlay of the building so that it's understood that the alternative compliance actually makes for a shorter, less impactful building to the surroundings. And that's obviously tying back to the design guidelines about fitting into context. And I mean, the design guidelines don't say it, but trying to be a respectful neighbor.
You're basically about the same height as across the street at DHM and the other Coventure building that's on the other side. Do you think it's an improvement on the side that shows the Smitty compared to what the DHM building has? The other one is just a flat brick with punched out windows. And then yours has a break of material, which I do like that part.
Yeah, and like I said, the stepping back, and if you go back to the design guidelines, it's not just taking a building up to the 27-foot height limit within 20 feet of Main Street and drawing that diagram back and going up to 3 stories from there. There's a lowering of scale, and the only component of the building that's actually reaching its max height limit within the first 20 feet is the middle third of the building. And so it's stepping down, it's both stepping back from the street and stepping down from side to side. So trying to respond to obviously the buildings around it as best we can. And exactly what you just said, not creating a straight wall up to 27 feet. And then the pedestrian entrance being the component off the northwest corner that steps back even further. So there's an additional kind of carving into the building space.
Yeah, in your drawings and the renderings, it does like show like this is our main entrance here.
Yeah.
It's just like the back of the alley just feels so imposing still, especially when you have a lot of, was it 2-story, like a condo on the street behind it? Because a couple, maybe it's apartment, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I think there's a triplex back
A
there.
triplex,
I think
yeah,
it's
it
2
was-
stories, yeah.
It's like 2
And I think there's like only 1 or 2 of them over there.
Yeah, and it's a UDC section discussing sort of butting up to residential zoning and limiting, there's an additional height limit off the alleyway if you're within 35 feet of that zoning. But it only applies to buildings with 5 or more residential units. So
Okay.
ours is below that threshold. And I know that building is technically 2 stories, but if you go look at it, it starts at a level above kind of street level. So they're a little bit taller.
Any other questions for the applicants?
Maybe we should read Kim's points.
Well, we'll do that when we get to our comments.
Oh, okay.
I think that try and stay on subject here, not get into P and Z issues. But how successful do you think the green wall is going to be? Or how challenging it's going to be to maintain it to the point that it's, not blight?
Yeah. We have discussed that. We feel pretty confident that finding the right material, the right species, it will be successful. I've seen plenty of examples, not just in Carbondale, but abroad, where people plan something like that and it doesn't work very well. I've also seen plenty of examples where it actually works great. So the intention, obviously, is to do everything we can to get a species that's hardy and can actually grow that height and, withstands. And obviously in the winter time, it looks a little different, but that element is there to try and soften the building edge, knowing it's a 3-story mass, within 5 feet or 6 feet of the property line next to the village smithy. And so extending that green space vertically, I would argue that success means that if it doesn't grow the full 3 stories, it's at least growing up the wall and it softens that edge a bit. So as long as it can grow up and create a pedestrian scale green space along the edge of the smithy yard, I think it's successful.
Have you got a plan B if it doesn't?
We haven't discussed a plan B, but we could certainly come up with some ideas, I think.
I think it's a good idea. I'm just curious and concerned that if it's not successful, what then?
Yeah. I think if we plant Virginia creeper at the bottom, it'll find its way 3 stories up.
Go see everywhere.
Okay, any more comments or questions for the applicant? Not a lot. Okay, any comments from the public out there?
I think they're all 4 and 5.
We actually have public today, so this is unusual. Pretty quiet. Okay. I'll close it to that portion of the meeting and start with our own internal conversation here, discussion of the building. Anybody?
You mean closing public comments?
Yeah. Meredith?
It somehow just doesn't feel like it's respectful of the original, what used to be there 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I don't know, I don't have any photos in my mind of what was there historically. So I'm sort of baffled as to what historically it looked like, that part of the street.
Yeah, that's it. You're just baffled. Okay. Heather?
So I know that you're doing, was it 4 units for residential in there? And I'm glad that's like more housing in Carbondale. But it just feels weird to have 3 stories kind of thing on the south side, because there's no 3-story building on the south side of the main street. And it's only the 3-story on the north side. And that's across the street, the DHM Coventry. And then that's the only thing is that space is the only place that you can do, I guess, a 3rd story and feel kind of matching with that one. And since you did say that you're trying to step back, it just feels like you're not stepping back enough on the alleyway. It just feels step back in the front, but not really on the back when tending to the context of all the historic buildings and residential stuff. It just feels like it should be like more like a pyramid or something. That's
Okay,
right. But I do not have any problems with the 12-foot compliance part.
okay.
Well,
John?
I'm still, I know the building height is gonna be discussed by the P and Z, but it is part of HCC's design guidelines, and I still am kind of baffled how we're losing 2 feet off the building height, but yet we're by reducing the 14 down to 12, but then you're putting that 2 feet into the ceiling heights. So that's really keeping the roof level at 35 feet. You're not actually lowering the roof level down that much. So that I'm not really in favor of compliant, the variance number 2. And concerning the overall building, it's just a huge bunch of mass where the buildings on either side of it and on the whole block aren't anywhere near that. And it just doesn't fit with the historical commercial core of that block of town. That used to be that block used to be kind of the center of town. The town's expanded and it's growing up to 4th Street too now. But it's just such a huge amount of building there that is going right next to our classic Billy Smithy restaurant, which is basically kind of one of the major faces of Carbondale. It just doesn't fit in Carbondale. It's so big and massive and a blob.
Well, there you go. Mark?
Don't we have guidelines about building adjacent to structures of merit?
I think so.
Right? You're supposed to step down as you approach it.
Yeah, it should be stepping down from basically both sides, but the
Right.
other side got demolished too, so we didn't get into that quick enough to be able to stop that. We should be able to step this back a little bit. That massive western wall facing the Smithy, it's a nice idea, putting plants up, going up the wall there, but it really doesn't block off the fact that it's a 37.5 feet high wall, almost the entire depth of the lot. Yeah, we should check into that. Structures next to structures of merit.
Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I can do a quick search for it right now.
When's this gonna go to P and Z?
We don't have a date set yet.
We need to answer that question before it does, please.
Okay.
So any other comments, Mark?
I agree with most of what John said. I think, if there wasn't a rooftop terrace, you wouldn't put a 30-inch parapet on the roof, right? I mean, no one would build a 30-inch parapet around a roof that is unoccupied. So I think you're comparing what you could build legally, which is a 37 and 137.6. But the fact is you wouldn't. And so I think that the rooftop terrace has a great impact on the building. I think, the stair tower and the elevator, doghouse, you're going to see that. That's going to have an impact. And I think, again, it's not really responding to anything else in the neighborhood at all. That's,
A question I would have, is there anything comparable to that building of that massive scale anywhere downtown?
Across the street.
Yeah, across the
Are there all
street.
those are buildings?
There's a
that-
They're
three-story.
3-story,
Yeah.
right to the property line.
But they don't have rooftop terrace in
No.
that one.
Yeah, I just think it's inevitable that that fourth story is going to be visible, but it's just massive. And it's quadruple the size of what's already there,
Yeah.
almost 10,000 square feet. Plus the roof.
Yeah, if they eliminated the rooftop and put that park, facility on one of their lower decks
This
and maybe
second
put them out to the side, it would kind of cut up the massive size of the west wall. They wouldn't have to ask for a variance. We could stay happy right at the building height, which is really asking a variance for changing the building height in the downtown area is a huge request. It's not like you're asking for something a little teeny tiny, change this or that. Building height is one of the major issues with all the buildings on Main Street. You could do what you did to the front with a terrace into that, kind of go around the side and the back. Still get good views of Silver, still have your happy little deck top outdoor park areas. You just wouldn't need an elevator or a set of stairs to get to them. And you wouldn't need variances. That would make it less of a blob.
Yeah, because it looks like the outdoor deck for the second floor is just for residential unit 4.
Yeah.
Well, 3 and 2 gets really tiny ones.
Well, my take on it is I'm really glad to see from the first go around, the introduction of brick and the cornice detailing that you've got. That was a really step in the right direction for developing compatibility with commercial buildings on Main Street. And I think, you have tried to, by breaking up the front facade into kind of this tripartite scheme and stepping back from the front, it helps reduce the massing effect of the building. And I understand the value of property such that you want to maximize your building and building size. But it is a big building. And it's adjacent to single-story structures of merit. Down the road, the possibility of a large building being built in the Smithy's yard is possible as land values go up.
No, it's not.
John says it's not. But, so that, in the future, if a building were built, that would help the western facade. But that western facade is going to be really, really visible for a really long time. And it's big. My take on it, and I think it's a decent idea, is to, and I know you're going to hate this because it is an amenity for the owners. I don't see it so much an amenity for the public, is the removal of the rooftop gardens and eliminating the need for the elevator and the stairs to, again, pull that down, the parapet down without damaging your heights for the interior spaces. Right now, you've got a 42-inch requirement if there's people on that roof. And that would give you the ability, again, to reduce the visual mass of the building, particularly from that west side. So, yeah, again, it's a P and Z question as to whether this will meet the alternative compliance criteria. But I'm not sure that the building as it's designed will meet that level of interpretation. Some minor points, I think that's the big point in my book. One of the minor points is the fenestration, the glass, bringing it right down to the sidewalk on the front, and you may want to reconsider that. Might want to be obscure glass or more historically some sort of panel work. It'll be hard to merchandise if that glass goes to the floor along that front wall. But that's a very minor point. I think that the 14-foot cornice line could be strengthened in this case in your front facade, and maybe even articulated with your brick column with a little bit of brick detail as a token to the historic setting that you're putting the building into. Other than that, I think that's all.
Kim, read Kim's. She turned in.
So this is what Kim has to say. She's the vice chair. And it's a rather strong statement. To staff and fellow historic preservation commissioners, I was disappointed to see that this building proposed for 242 to 256 Main Street exhibits very few changes that were recommended at the previous courtesy review.
Your mic on?
Yeah, but I'll use it. Some of the, in short, this design shows a blatant disregard for the historic character of HCC, especially as it pertains to that particular block. Some of the earliest town photographs include the east side of the village smithy, and unlike the far east industrial end of the street, this block is an important part of our history. Out of respect for the two nearby structures of merit on the block, I would like to see the design team go back to the drawing board. Technicalities such as the first floor and rear height variances would set a questionable precedent for future building in Carbondale. No doubt the rear portion would be visible from the street. In addition, not only does the green wall look out of place, it is quite unlikely to grow, as seen in the attempt at the storage facility in town. In conjunction with the comp plan, regulations, and previous public comment regarding the character of HCC, I believe that it would be a mistake for the HPC to give this design its approval. Kim McGee, Vice Chair. So, there you go.
I just counted out the deck spaces. There's 7 decks, which makes the roof deck superfluous. There's already 7. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 commercial ones,
And then there's 4.
and then 4 on the second floor. So it seems that the rooftop garden is unnecessary in any case.
Are we allowed to comment back or?
Sure,
is it-
yeah, this is a very informal,
Okay,
and
didn't wanna step on
we do
anyone's
take
toes.
notes, but that's about as far as it goes.
okay. So I'll address that comment first. So the deck space proposed up to this point is for the residential spaces is private deck space off of that residence, which is actually required per code. The deck space for the commercial spaces is only obviously accessed through those commercial spaces. So the point of the roof deck is a more public amenity instead of, let's say, First Friday, someone wants to host a rooftop event. It's actually very unlikely that you'd be able to go through someone's obviously through their residential space or even through a commercial space to access a deck. And so that's the point of the roof deck, is to provide that sort of amenity. I did want to mention, there was a comment earlier, Heather, I think you made it about 3-story structures on the south side of Main Street. I know obviously right on this block, there isn't another one, but the La Raza building is a 3-story structure. 320 Main Street, which is next to the Brass Anvil. I don't know there's 2 stores in the ground level. That building is actually 27 feet for the full width of the building, 20 feet back steps up to 3 stories for the full width of the building. So in terms of a building that looks like the diagram from the code, that building fits that bill. And then obviously Marble Distillery at the end of the street is a pretty large building as well, which is a 3-story building. So those are just a couple things I wanted to mention. And then I know there's been some discussion about what was there, 70 years ago, 70 years plus. I don't know if there's anywhere in the guidelines that discusses, obviously responding to context is an important part of being in a historic district. But I don't know that it's required that if there was a 1-story brick building or even a 2-story brick building, that means that on the site, a 1-story or 2-story building is all that can ever be built there. And so I think it's important to remember that obviously there are guidelines in place that we're responding to, and there's massing that we're responding to. Whether it's successful or not, I think can be debated, but I just want to make sure it's stated that we don't necessarily, it's not required that we just fit a building in that existed previously.
Okay. Any other comments?
I just would like to see a little bit more stepping on the 2nd story along the side and the rear and the alleyway. Because it just feels just too imposing on that side.
Okay.
Maybe there's a way to work some other place, like the commercial area, and do like more of a balcony all the way around or something as your public amenity space instead of the rooftop.
Yeah, to me, the rooftop seems a little like I can't see how the public is going to really interact with it well. It's more like you're going to be invited up there by the homeowners. And so it's kind of a verging on a private party deck. And, I know we don't speak to use here, but I think it's triggers both the stair core and the elevator condition that that it kind of makes the building, as John was pointing out, a little more massive than it would be if it were in full compliance with the ordinances. And I think if it were to go forward with that, it does set a precedence that is probably not good for decisions made for future buildings. Anyway, any more comments?
Well, there's lots of things you guys could do besides the rooftop to be compliant and fit into Carbondale, if you really do want to fit into Carbondale. So there's plenty of other choices besides variances and a public park on top of the roof, which is a pretty good one. You know, you don't get very many comments like that. Thank you, though. Thanks for coming in.
Okay, moving right along. Thank you very much for, I think, a very thorough presentation and ready to take the next step.
Thank you all.
Yep. Okay, 6:40, it's time for the OTR
Oh, no, it's too short.
final design guidelines. Suzanne, are you on?
I am on.
There you are.
Thank you for letting me be here virtually.
We miss you in person, though.
I would much rather be there in person, but I just wasn't up for the drive.
Okay. Where's? So we've been given two handouts. Town of Colburn and
Eric, no, no, I'm not-
that's
no.
not part of
Eric,
this.
Eric.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Jared.
Back there in the cheap seats. Yeah, you know, I don't really have much to present on this. I really think it's a open dialogue and I'll let Susanna really kind of discuss the guidelines and you know, how they respond to the feedback that we heard from the community, from you guys, from all the other you know, partners who have kind of provided comments. But really, you know, my memo just tried to summarize kind of the process that occurred to date and really focus on some of that feedback that we received, highlighting the number of times that we've reached out to the OTR neighborhood directly and invited them to participate in kind of this process. And so, you know, I'd really prefer to kind of turn it over to Susanna to maybe go through kind of the document specifically and what's there. And then, you know, I think maybe at the end, Heather can kind of discuss some of the items that she brought up to us and some things like that. You know, I think from a process standpoint, if you guys feel comfortable with, you know, the nuts and bolts of what's being presented in these design guidelines, you know, we would love a recommendation from you all that we can forward up to the BOT. If you don't feel comfortable tonight, you have more comments, that's perfectly fine. And we can come back with additional changes and stuff like that. We are going to present these guidelines to the Planning and Zoning Commission next Thursday, to kind of bring them up to speed on everything that's been going on, see if they have any comments. And those will kind of be folded into kind of the entire package that will ultimately go up to the Board of Trustees. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions for me or really anything like that. Otherwise, I'd be happy just to turn it over to Susanna to maybe chat about kind of what's before you guys tonight and how it's changed since the last time you saw it.
Well, one quick question. Would you want any commissioners at the P and Z meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are more than welcome. We wanted to make sure that Kim would be available to be either in person or online before we scheduled that meeting next Thursday, and she seemed to indicate that she should be able to be online, if not in person, but you know, she'll hopefully be there, and I'd encourage each and every one of you, if you want to attend that meeting and kind of share your thoughts and what you heard. I think it's valuable. Ultimately, the Planning and Zoning Commission's probably gonna have limited use of these design guidelines in their day-to-day review. And the reason that's the case is the majority of projects that we will likely see in the OTR will either be a review by this body or a review by staff or something straight to building permit. And I don't envision a ton of scenarios where where new development would rise to the level of a public hearing before the P and Z, especially considering kind of some of the steps they're taking to soften the requirements related to ADUs and the process related to ADUs throughout town and within the OTR. So there likely will be times, but I don't anticipate a ton of use of these design guidelines by that review body.
Suzanne?
Well, hi, everyone. I hope you've had a chance to read through the document. I had sent this out originally before our last community meeting. Meredith took some time looking at the document in detail and gave me a lot of good notes on punctuation and stuff, and that's most of what's incorporated in the document that you got most recently, the one dated December instead of November. Nothing really substantially changed in the document between those two, so it was mostly punctuation, spelling, and some grammar. I did finally get the comments back from the state, and most of their comments are pretty straightforward. I think the one that I want to discuss with you tonight is some of the organization of the document. And I can get into more details about that if you want to jump into that. Or the other thing I was going to mention is, after listening to your discussion on the previous case, whether you thought that there were guidelines maybe missing from the new construction in the HCC zone that you might want to look at in more detail. Particularly the acknowledgement of structure of merit on an adjacent lot. I think that we added that to the OTR zone, but not to the HCC zone.
I also did find a section that talks about that in the UDC. That way you
I
just,
can't hear you at all.
sorry. Yeah, there is a section on that in the UDC that talks about the approving authority can require additional setbacks in excess of the minimum requirements for the code to specifically mitigate any impacts to the structure of merit. So if you want to add that to your recommendation for 242.
Let's leave 242 as the conversation was. I think we had good feedback from you all on that. They're no longer here, so I don't want to discuss that without them present. But in context to what Susanna's talking about, there was additional language added to OTR. It could be something that gets considered strengthening, adding some more language in the HCC portion of the design guidelines to speak more to that concept that you guys were discussing tonight. So in that context, it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, I didn't even think of looking at the UDC when proofing and reading.
And obviously, if any of you have other notes on things that you found in the guidelines that you have questions about, happy to address those.
Well, I do like the new format of taking out the forms out. That was always just a kind of a distraction. I don't think it should have ever been in there in the first place.
Yeah, it's much cleaner without them.
Yep, I'm comfortable with the way it is now, between Meredith and her changes.
And Eric added some.
And the text is good. The content is good.
The school teacher changes.
Well, it's also, since I'm a layperson and I have no architectural background whatsoever, it's comprehensive, it's comprehensible to me. As a non-professional, there's a lot of words I never knew before, like muntin. So the glossary was very helpful, but
Yeah,
I can understand it. I can read it and understand it and see, oh,
I'm with you on that.
It's great.
I think you did a absolutely fabulous job, and I really appreciate the level of expertise that you've brought to the document. It's really, I think, valuable, very valuable set of guidelines for anybody doing work here. So I feel we're very fortunate to have brought it to this point.
Well, I'm glad you're happy.
And I like the new diagrams too.
yeah,
The massing
the illustrations are
diagram.
good.
Yeah.
The illustrations are good. I don't know if we want to talk about the design accessibility yet, or is that we're just still talking about content?
Let's touch on a couple of the things that the state brought up. Let's see. I think they suggested, and I think we talked about this before, a sustainability section. And at our previous conversation, we kind of felt that that was covered in the UDC. We could add some discussion of how those sustainability measures might apply to historic buildings in order to not damage the historic integrity. So that's something that I think could fairly simply be added to the historic part of chapter. And then the other big one is, well, there's two, I guess. One is more making the new construction a little more separate in terms of commercial buildings and residential buildings. And I think that that's partly because there are both in the HCC, and the HCC guidelines currently focus on commercial buildings more than kind of non-traditional historic commercial buildings, like the smithy that are gable buildings. So that's something that we could look at, kind of pulling in a little bit of language to address those things. And then finally, this question of pulling out kind of the way it's organized right now, I'm treating additions to both historic buildings and non-historic buildings as new construction. And I think the state reviewers finding that a little bit confusing, and that people might not know where they needed to look for the information and the applicable guidelines. So I guess the question is, do we want to do a separate piece about it would be somewhat duplicating our efforts in the new construction chapters to put the new construction on historic buildings into treatment at working with historic buildings? Or is it just sufficient in your minds to kind of put a note to reference guidelines in the new construction section for when you're doing additions to historic buildings?
Hmm.
Is that clear?
Well, what's your opinion on that?
I feel like we would have a fair amount of repetition if we tried to have the discussion in both places. So I would rather maybe handle it with a specific little paragraph or a guideline that references, which I think we have in there, references the new construction section instead of duplicating our efforts in both places. Particularly since you're reviewing buildings that are actually historic but not recognized, not considered structures of merit potentially, and you still want those to be added onto in sensitive ways. So I wouldn't want to put additions to historic buildings in a chapter that made people think they didn't need to apply those considerations to a non-structure of merit or a non-recognized historic building.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
All right. John says that sounds good.
Okay, then.
No, that does sound good. So, yeah, I think that the more succinct the document is, and the less repetition and it's thick as it is, I think probably the better, as long as, as long as it remains clear and distinctive and not muddy the water.
Muddy, yeah. I think that's, as a designer, I think that's what you're looking for is clear directions. They don't have to be repeated. You just have to know where to look for them.
Yeah, I agree.
Susanna, I had a quick question on that sustainability comment from the state. I know the design guidelines discuss kind of solar panels, but when they're talking about sustainability, what within that were they really focusing on?
They are talking about ways to make your historic building more sustainable, like screen or storm windows, screen doors, porches, tinting windows, that kind of thing that would be ways of making your historic windows and doors more energy efficient without damaging the historic integrity. I believe we have that addressed in the guidelines.
I think so too.
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess she was looking for, let me see where that note shows up.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's making what am I trying to say? Trying to keep things out of the trash and reused as opposed to thrown away and new capital put into new product.
Yeah, and Suzanne, as you're looking that up, I wonder if kind of similar to the other comment about, not repeating guidelines, but kind of pointing people to some of the guidelines that already exist. I wonder if, maybe a sustainability section could be created at the end that really says, a lot of these are just treated in the doors and windows sections, these other sections of the design guidelines where it talks about reuse, fixing, repairing as opposed to replacing, and that those kind of speak to the sustainability goals of this document. And kind of to your point, maybe it's just like a sentence or two that kind of directs people to look into those other sections where a lot of that already exists. But just to highlight that
That should be pretty easy.
that sustainable improvements are promoted so long as they're taken into, account the historical aspects of the buildings or the character of the neighborhood. I wonder if something like that can kind of find that middle ground and appease both the state and kind of what we already have.
Yeah.
And like reference the UDC where it is in there too. Like this is where, because we had went with, because it was in the UDC and covers it all, like, yeah, it's listed in here, like a couple sentences, like you can find it in this section or something.
Yeah, I did take out specific references to UDC chapters just to make sure that we weren't, to allow things to change.
Well, I guess we don't have to put page number and exact section, but it was like, oh, sustainability, it's under UDC.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've left it very top level.
The UDC never changes.
Just keeps getting amended.
Aren't we overlapping a little bit with the energy codes and the IEBC?
We do, but the existing building code provides exceptions to the energy code requirements for historic buildings,
Right.
as long as they're recognized as historic buildings. And that's what we're talking about specifically, as opposed to just unrecognized historic buildings.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so can we talk about the accessibility?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that happened last year was the state did a House bill that they have to have all government documents and all municipalities, jurisdictions and everything has to comply to accessibility, which has these certain standards now. So the thing is, like, we have a minimum of 12 points on there. We have to use sans serif fonts. You have to be left justification. You have to have a lot of white space and have things pop out. There's even like a website tracker where you can even check to see if the guidelines, which is this like WebAM thing where you find the ratio of it and it has to have a certain thing of 4.5 to 1. So every jurisdiction is supposed to be like slowly complying to that. And one of the things I noticed about what Susanna did was a lot of grayscale, a lot of black on top of grayscale type of photos and everything. And it's very hard to read, and that's not really passing the accessibility law. So yesterday I put together a sample of like the first 4 or 5 pages of showing like making it brighter and bolder. And then I have in the other packet is like previous plans that I've done in private sector that I've done in the last 5 some years. And it shows like what is a good standard you want to go with and design it so that we can actually have a matching like map Carbondale, the comp plan. Pretty much anything that was been made in like the last 2 or 3 years has changed to making it more part of this accessibility standards. So that's what I was working on. And there's like things that you can see of like how we're gonna like put white space here, a lot more colored pictures. You have to put down a little, the alt of what this picture is. So it's like shows us up in the digital side where like if somebody can't see or something like that, somebody can read, oh, this is the description of this picture. So it's just been slowly, so most places haven't like been changing over. It's just been a very slow going process for pretty much everybody across the state right now. So like, it's just like new documents are trying to like comply with that. So one of the things that I noticed was also a lot of italicized, tiny print. That's right justification. I think on the consultant side, from a lot of different jurisdictions, I've been looking at a lot of different comp plans and from everywhere on the Western Slope and the Front Range the last like month or two. And I've noticed that a lot of them do a lot more white space, very bold colors, making sure that it's not too small on everything, a lot of text. So there's a lot of documents that have been like longer and longer because they want to make it much more easier to read. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do for this one is to comply with that. And we just need to figure out what things that you like about, and then we're going to be quickly getting this Word document into a maybe InDesign, or I'm not sure what we're deciding with yet.
She's working in InDesign.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Suzanne is InDesign.
I wasn't sure if this is InDesign or Word. 'Cause there's a
No,
lot of formatting issues I've noticed on here. Now, things like lining straight.
Could I see that document?
Oh,
No, the accessibility.
yeah, I
document.
have another one here. I
like,
only made a couple copies, but this is what our work has. That's what our communication department put together for everybody to use.
Who put it together?
Garfield County Communication Department.
Oh,
so they want brighter colors, and more color seems to be more distracting to me.
So it's less about colors and it's more about a document's ability to be read by kind of the accessibility reading apparatuses. So people with, visual impairment and other accessibility needs, being able to have documents that kind of interact with those tools that assist those individuals with reading the document. And that's kind of the larger scope and scale. And so, I do think there's, definitely some aspects of maybe kind of increasing font size or, some of the
Hierarchies of things, I think.
some of the, general layout of the document that could assist and, to Heather's point, there is some locations where maybe the text over an image becomes difficult to read, especially if they're not kind of contrasting colors.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some stuff like that are very easy fixes, but I think Heather's kind of also bringing up a kind of a separate topic of, do we want to take the document itself and kind of create more color to it as opposed to very black and white? And that can be both with the overall kind of page layout, having kind of headers, footers, other elements, as well as, where possible, trying to incorporate more color imagery as opposed to just black and white imagery.
The reason I stayed away from the color imagery, except for obviously in the diagrams, was color I find tends to kind of level the visual. So if you have a red car parked next to a house, or it's not, you're looking at the cars, you're looking at the signs, you're looking at the color stuff that's populating the photo as opposed to the architecture. So I find that the black and white renders pictures of buildings better than the color. And so that's kind of an intentional decision to stay with the black and white in terms of the pictures of buildings. It just kind of, it just takes all that extra noise out of the image. I do still intend to go and kind of reshoot some of these pictures to get fewer cars in the pictures if I can, but that's part of the decision to go to the black and white pictures as opposed to the color. And it's a little bit easier to leave more white space, I found, with the black and white pictures because they blend into the white space a little bit better. So that was the rationale behind that choice. And then adding the blue kind of heading color was a way of bringing some color back into the document without going to the color pictures.
I disagree.
It's preference. I don't think that is something that we have a mandate to do one way or the other. That's a personal preference. And so, I think Susanna definitely has some good rationale, and I think it's up to you guys to determine which way you want this document to go.
It's also the expense of color printers and the expense, if it's online, that's one thing, but
Well, it's always going to be online and most people are probably access that too. But some people like to read and see paper copies in it.
me too.
But one of the things that I noticed, like, I let Jared know in an email that Steamboat Springs had just done their design guidelines and they did their final draft in October. 156 pages because they had spread out a lot of stuff and like maybe one thing for each page. It's very thorough, it's very colorful, and they were branding it with, I think, other stuff that Steamboat was doing.
I wish we'd had this conversation a long time ago, because I know for reformatting the whole document is not a small job.
Yeah. And we're gonna have
I will defer because I haven't got a good sense of, what the states really wants and the impact of making those changes. I'll let you guys try and figure that one out.
Okay.
That's my personal take.
It would be easy to kind of improve the overlaps a little bit, and make the text more readable that way. That would be a fairly easy fix. And I can certainly make the font size in some of the diagrams and things bigger. That's not a problem. I actually did that already with a couple of diagrams, and I can do that again. There kind of is a point where the overall font size works with the page layout that we have, because I'm trying to keep all the guidelines under one heading in one column, and I don't want, making it much bigger is gonna, eliminate that possibility, basically. So these are the trade-offs. And we are going to have the document translated into Spanish, and that's going to require a fair amount of reformatting, I would imagine, as well, because things aren't going to flow quite the same way as they do now. So there may be slight differences in the Spanish version. So I can look at some of those things, and I'd be happy to look at the guidelines for readability and see what I can incorporate more easily into what we've got.
Okay.
Yeah, so I agree with Suzanne. I think there are some low hanging fruit that probably can be done that can improve the legibility that isn't going to drastically change. But yeah, I think some of these other things could be bigger, overarching changes to the layout of the document, which could have, ramifications.
I am fine with, if we want to go back down to 10 point, because it looks like it was 10 point originally.
Mhm.
And that's what I've done for previous ones. I've just done like work stuff right now into 12 points. So I kind of got used to it. But it's just some of the stuff that I've had problems is like looking at the guidelines, nothing is lining up. We got weird stuff like here going on that does not look good to me. It looks very sloppy.
Which pages?
It's, I'll send you a red line because I have one that's been written and note taked one of
Okay.
these things already on a PDF already. But I'm gonna probably add more stuff. And I know it's in InDesign, it's a certain way of doing shifting. I'm like, seems to be the only person that seems to ever do this, like a certain way of having everything lined up, like all the text is lined up, all the numbering, like if it's like A, B, C columns, it's together. And you have like the little mini space right there, and it just looks cleaner.
Okay.
For that kind of stuff is what I mostly was noticing in here. And like a weird V that showed up in one of the call out boxes. Anything that was the dark print over the grayscale.
Yeah, I think that would be great then to maybe get that markup over to us and Susanna and, you know, Susanna and us can kind of chat.
And I can even figure out in InDesign how to like lay out and just figure out what exactly where it is. And I can like pinpoint it on the, I guess, the bar where everything is and like show exactly what I have for the amounts, the kerning and everything that I've done, because I've been doing this for years.
Yeah, if, you know, to the greatest extent that you want to share some of that information, great. And, you know, like I said, we could get with Susanna and then we can work on some revisions to the document that can kind of help with some of that stuff. But I haven't heard from the overall group that you want to kind of do a large redesign to the overall design of the document. Speak now or forever hold your
Would
peace.
you like to just do color on the front page kind of thing and just do minimum?
And I do know, Heather, you have a bunch of photos
Yeah, I'm
from
gonna be
taking
doing
photos
that
of
on
homes. And
set.
so if you can share that with us, that
Mhm.
could be
I'm gonna
an
put this
easy
everything in a
way of
Dropbox.
Susanna getting some of these photos in, and may not have to be wait till next summer to get.
Oh, yeah, because now that I know
Updated
exactly what you're,
photos?
well, what I have, now that we have the copy of the final, I can figure out exactly what photo I have taken picture and I'm like, oh, this can replace that one. This is
Okay.
similar area of the building, maybe a different angle or something like that.
Okay.
Because I did take a lot of HCC ones in the summertime, and I'm not sure how many that actually had like cars in front of them. Some of them did, some of them didn't. But I know like the one on 4th Street had like no cars, so I think I got a couple of that one.
Okay. That works.
Sounds good.
All right,
But have we decided, like, are we doing any color or are we just doing minimum?
guys have an opinion?
I would say minimum.
Like, do you just want to do like the front page and?
Yeah, I think the front page would be fine with color.
Yeah, I think what you've kind of worked on here on this front page, I think sending that over, you know, I see no cars in there. I think it's, you know, can be a great cover page, and I'm sure it's something, especially if it's already in InDesign, something that Susanna can very easily pull into her
Yeah,
document.
I can package everything up and have it as a zip and upload it to a Dropbox so that you
Awesome.
can see it.
Perfect.
Okay, that'd be great.
Because I had like things that on there was guides and like all kinds of stuff going on. I just hadn't decided every like what color scheme and like, are we just gonna do shades of blue? It's like, we could do that. And that's why I had on like the other document that I showed of like Silverthorne, they were branded to be,
Gold brand.
no, keep going in the other pictures. It's like 5 different documents. I just selected
Oh,
pictures in there. So like that one, like Silverthorne had to be their logo colors and they branded it. So I basically branded anything that was off of theirs. Other jurisdictions were like free for all. Whole Crested Butte had their own way. And then I know they changed the layout at the end to make it more third text. Or 2/3 text and 1/3, I guess, pictures and everything, but it's very similar to what the original one that we sent to them. But it's stuff like that, rebranding, like Carbondale brand, like they have a logo colors. And
You know, I
was-
don't think outside of logos that Carbondale is
It's a brand.
is concerned about
Yeah.
that. I
We're
can tell
very
you from all of
funky and-
our other plans that each one has kind of their own design and life to it. So, you know, I think this one can have its own
Mhm.
design feel to it. And, like I said, I heard from the group that less is more.
Mhm.
So, I think we can kind of stick with that, and then we can work with Susanna to make some
Okay.
improvements.
Okay, thank you. And thank you. Yeah, it's just,
I think it's
do
a
we want
motion to
do you want a
do,
motion?
work on, was it their staff?
I think
Yeah,
it's-
so,
Edits.
so the motion included kind of, you know, give staff the authority to work on some very minor grammatical tweaks and some formatting tweaks in alignment with what kind of Heather and you guys discussed, but substantively, nothing will change. And if you guys feel comfortable with that, we can do that. And we'll obviously bring back whatever's, you know, show you guys what is going up to the Board of Trustees, but we won't bring it back formally for your
Is there a
blessing.
second?
What's that?
Is there a second?
I can't make that motion.
Jared.
What Jared said.
So you're making a motion
Mark-
to do.
Mark makes
staff.
Jared's motion.
Perfect.
I'll second that.
Which is light tweaks and the low hanging fruit. But overall, yeah, content to remain the same.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, moving right along.
Quickly.
This-
Jared, would you like to
Quick.
give us a update on the Thompson porch?
Well,
Quick.
can I ask a
Okay.
quick question before I go?
Yes.
So are we still planning on going forward to P and Z next week?
Yes, we'll plan on presenting this to P and Z next Thursday. Suzanne, I can give you a call tomorrow
Okay,
if you're around and we can kind of chat about that.
yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Very good.
Okay. good
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Suzanne.
Thompson House. So the
Back porch.
trustees approved the contract to do the repair work. They hired Aspen Preservation
Company.
Company. Sorry, I'm going off memory and I hoped I got the name correct.
Good.
As you can see, they were the low bidder. Kim worked diligently on throwing everything out of the back porch and putting it in other locations, not throwing it out. John, I don't know if you were a part of that, but she said she was gonna get a few people, essentially protect the assets that were there. And then Chris Thompson was gonna get working on it. Due to the weather, he decided not to start last week. And looks to be starting this week. So hopefully that work will continue through December. But when I chatted with him, he seemed pretty confident, weather permitting, that he could get everything done in December. That was kind of outlined in that scope of work.
Thought it's supposed to snow tomorrow.
Yeah, very good. Okay. And that brings us to the last action item, which is the demonstration garden at the Thompson House. Has everyone had the opportunity to read Sue Gray's
I printed it. As far as I got.
job description? It was in the packet. Nope. Well, I was duly impressed with how comprehensive her outline of work was. And not only does she do the Thompson demonstration garden, but also runs students and lectures on historic gardens. And I think, actually, I feel strongly that HPC, who holds our cultural heritage should really take interest in seeing this part of our heritage preserved. Sue has been doing it on a voluntary basis for a number of years and is at the point in her life where she needs to retire. And that said, I think for her program to continue, it does need to be funded, a funded program. And if you haven't seen it, it's well worth the time taken to look at it. The town owns the house. The Historical Society owns the contents. And I think the town needs to take a little pride in not only the house, but the grounds, because they're coupled. One reflects the other. And while we can put money into the house, I also think we need to ask the town to put money into the grounds. So she provided kind of a list of hours that it takes her to do the work on an annual basis. I've asked a professional gardener to review that list and put numbers in terms of what it would cost to hire somebody to do that work. And I haven't got a handout for you, but anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 a year to do not only the weekly care, but the seed saving that goes on at the end of the season and the preparation it takes to do it in the spring. And I think HPC should really step up to the plate and figure out what a next step should be. We should talk with town staff, but it should probably be administrated through Parks and Recs. But it should be a dedicated fund specifically for the demonstration garden, so that it becomes part of Parks and Recs budget. And I'm curious what, Jared, what you think a next step in regards to all of that would be.
Before you get going on that, wouldn't that be I see a mutual working between Parks and Rec and HPC for this, because it's got little of each. It's Parks and Rec does the grounds, but it's us that want to do the seed saving and the historical part of it. So I envision more of a joint effort there. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, I think, next step would be probably to, get before the Park and Rec Commission and share this information with them and kind of the cost estimates, and see if there's any interest or support from that group in this concept, whether it's supporting of the idea and, maybe not having the funds available, or, having the funds available partially all, but needing assistance with other things. But I think having a conversation with the Park and Rec Commission would be a good next step, seeing where they're at. And then ultimately, I would envision a request, either joint request from Park and Rec and HPC, or just a request from HPC, depending on where Park and Rec stands, to be kind of presented to the Board of Trustees to see if it's something that they want to consider funding. Given where we're at in the budget cycle, I would say, kind of setting these conversations up to make a budget request ask of 2027 would be very plausible. I don't know about the feasibility of getting something done in 2026, but I think it's good to start having those conversations just because I can envision them with these boards and commissions meeting once a month, taking a little bit to, get back and forth between Park and Rec and HPC and then ultimately up to the BOT.
Their name is escaping me right now, but the group that does all those, what?
Be friendly.
No, the one on the south side of the bathroom that's doing all that, between the bathroom and the tennis courts.
The food, the,
What is that?
the,
Sustainable, no,
yes, it's that food, the food forest.
yeah, whatever that group is. There's a group there that is kind of got their own thing going, but they may be talked into expanding and taking part of this also. Because they're doing the same thing right there on the same spot.
Okay.
But John, if you remember at Park and Rec meetings, they're all volunteer, and actually Park and Rec has taken over maintenance of a lot of that area because the volunteers have all disappeared.
Oh, yeah,
So that's a problem with volunteer efforts.
yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
So this position.
Okay, well, Parks and Rec may be more apt to chip in for this if we include that also.
That could be part of it if they're already kind of doing some work in that area. And
Just
they already
something
have
more-
someone on the hook, there might be a willingness to kind of expand scope of work, do some additional work as long as they have the skill set to do it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think it would be, again, very reasonable to kind of have a conversation with the Park and Rec Commission, see what they're doing there. And if there's an appetite from that group to participate in this, or in an ideal world, just say, yeah, of course we'll do it. And we have the money and we'll start it up this summer.
What is this budget for? Are we doing for a position that's a part-time seasonal thing that somebody's gonna be coordinating? Or Sue was like the one that was coordinating everything all the time?
I think Eric's conversation was hiring a landscaper to do the work, not
Town needs another.
not hire a person, but
Mhm.
hire a third party who we say, here's the scope of work that you do this
Well,
every week.
it's an interesting position because not only is it a gardener position, but it's a historian position. And part of the scope of work is being very acquainted with the history of the gardens and being able to be a docent to groups that come through. So our role in it is maintaining the historic preservation of this critical piece to, the Carbondale Valley. And we all too often look at the buildings, but the real setting is the subsistence living that occurred here. And that's a really important part of our history. And I feel it needs to be funded and preserved. And it won't happen if it's volunteer. It really does need to be a paid position.
So what we're going for is Parks and Rec Department will be the coordination of just like watching over the supervision and then hiring this third party to actually do the work. Is that what we're going for the budget?
That's right
Okay,
here, Eric.
Okay. I
Presenting.
just want to know, because I was just reading the whole thing and then like she talks about the volunteer and what she did, and it just seems like it's an all year round part-time position that somebody has to do in the Parks and Rec that's going to be coordinating and make sure, oh, this is the certain time, we got to get this going kind of thing. Make sure everybody's hitting their deadlines of what planting and maintenance.
And that would be kind of why the Park and Rec Department would be a ideal overseer of this type of work, because they're already doing a lot of that work
Yeah,
throughout
they
town.
do a lot of that already. There's a lot of gardens and flower beds and, cared for beyond just grass cutting, a landscape in town. So it's not a
Weed
far reach to
mitigation.
have them administrate this.
Weed mitigation.
Yeah.
Correct, but I think a combination of the town arborist to the greatest degree possible. He does not have the capacity to take this on, but he can provide meaningful input. But I do find that,
It'd
the
be a
park and rec
referral.
department would have more staff who could help instruct a contractor to do this type of work. As opposed to Carl. He does great work, don't get me wrong, but he needs more help just to do what we're already asking him to do it.
Funding for another person,
Mhm.
or at least
Part-time,
But
correct,
the town hasn't been able to fund it.
correct.
Problem is, nobody can live here.
Mhm. So I think that would be good. I would say, John, you've got a in with the Park and Rec Commission.
Yeah, I think most of them still like me.
So I'd say, maybe working that angle and seeing, what meeting coming up might be a good one to kind of float this idea to them would be a good next step.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. Okay, anything else? Where's my
Staff report?
Okay, I can do a quick one.
staff report?
All right, so 789 Lincoln is a structure of merit. They're in residential low density, I think, so it does not require a courtesy review with you guys. They're proposing an addition. So just wanted to let you know that that's happening. They're still in their application phase with us. Second thing, is there any interest in attending the Saving Places Conference? Trying to get on the CLG scholarship waitlist to go to that conference.
That's next spring or something.
It's in February.
Mid-February.
In Denver. And I think we have education money, but we can also, if there's interest, I could put together that there's a scholarship fund. Right now, it's already been accounted for. If they get more money, then they would provide more scholarships, so then it would lessen the burden on the HPC's budget. So that's basically.
Just letting you know, it's like $400 some to go to the February one, and I think it was $150 for the hotel room a night
Where is it?
It's in Denver.
on Quebec. It's a DoubleTree or something.
I think that's the one we're interested in going to.
February 13th or something.
Could you send me? I probably already have it, but send it to me again, so.
I have
Um,
housing, so that's.
If there's blanket interest, they'll fund up to a certain amount, so I can just put in an application to help pair with. And if people decide to go and we get funded, then we can use the money. If it's an unknown, we'll just have to figure out how much we have in our education budget.
And then there's also On the Road in Buena Vista, like June 12th to 14th or something like that. And that's usually a lot cheaper. That's 175 was the last time what Kim and I went to. But I don't know what hotels are going to be like in Buena Vista. So
What is it?
it's On the Road of Saving Places. It's like a weekend thing. So you go all day Saturday, like half a morning on Sunday. And then they have like First Friday was in Steamboat. So they did that and you did whatever you want.
Should I have a show of hands? Anybody
I
interested?
can go and I have housing in Denver, but I don't know when it is or where. And so
I could send you the info.
send me the info.
Okay, and you.
John raised his hand as well. So Meredith and John.
Sweet. And then the last thing is the January 1st meeting is canceled because it's New Year's. So have fun.
January 1st meeting. Are we gonna postpone it or make it
It's
a week later?
canceled.
Canceled.
Canceled. Okay.
So.
Too hard to try to.
But we will have a February meeting, correct? Okay. So you all get a long vacation here.
Yeah, looks like Chaco's Park is making our way to us.
Okay. Yeah,
What's it gonna do?
Chaco Park.
so that's
Right
it
there.
from the staff, all right? Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, the motion has adjourned.